because you never know, I might just begin. So, okay, I'm still reading people's welcomes, even though I'm starting the talk now. So this is, I don't know how many Sutta classes we've done altogether, but quite a lot. And we're probably about halfway through this little book in the chapter on good friendship. It's the second or third, possibly, session, I think the second on good friendship, which is a beautiful topic and very rich. So I'm definitely encouraging lots of input today. I may have some questions for you as well around role models and who they are for you and why, because this is something we often lack in today's world, I think. Really good role models, that people that we can look up to and learn from, and that we feel are perhaps even more virtuous than ourselves, at least in some ways. There'll be weaknesses and strengths in all of us, but, you know, to have someone you can look up to in some regards, and there might be many people, is just so important, as we will see. And I would like to get straight into it. It's page 88 for those who have the book. So welcoming those who came a little bit later as well. I see you all, Olivia, Sean. Yeah. Maybe there's a second screen as well. Wow, we're on double screens. I was making sure I have a sense of who's here. Wonderful. So lovely to be together. Good. So this little paragraph starts, it's called Good Friendship in the Household Life. And I don't know, perhaps the household life can be applied also to monastic life. Maybe sometimes they don't apply so easily, but I'm sure we can take the spirit of this. So, and this is from the Anguttara 8, number 54. So you can always go back in there into the text themselves and reread these and see how they relate to maybe other suttas, or whether this is just an excerpt. Sometimes there can be more. But here it begins. What is good friendship? That's the question, isn't it? Here, in whatever village or town a clansperson lives, they associate with householders or their children, and I am changing the language, whether I should or not, into a gender neutral or a gender inclusive language here. Whether young or mature virtue, whether young and of mature virtue, or old and of mature virtue, who are accomplished in faith, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. One converses with them and engages in discussions with them. Insofar as they are accomplished in faith, one emulates them with respect to their faith. Insofar as they are accomplished in virtuous behavior, one emulates them with respect to their virtuous behavior. Insofar as they're accomplished in generosity, one emulates them with respect to their generosity. Insofar as they're accomplished in wisdom, one emulates them with respect to their wisdom. This is called good friendship. So there's already quite a lot in here that I find very interesting, and I'm sure more of you will have insights as well into this. But first of all, I find it interesting that we're talking about, you know, the kind of people that we should converse with. And I don't know if the opposite holds true, that we shouldn't converse overly much, at least, with people who are not accomplished in faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. But certainly here we're being encouraged to converse and have discussions with those that we feel are. And of course, in the Buddha's teachings, it's not only that it's important to hear the Dhamma, but it's also important to discuss it as well. And I know that's why many of you come to this discussion class, because it's nice to actually have the opportunity to clarify points of the Dhamma and to build upon them, or to question them, or even disagree, right? Because that helps us get clearer about what's true for us. And so the conversing and engaging in discussion is something very much encouraged by the Buddha throughout the Tipitaka, throughout his teachings, basically, in the Pali Canon, and something that used to happen a lot in ancient India, and I think still today. And then not only that, but insofar as they are accomplished in those things, one should emulate them in that respect. So I find this very beautiful, because presumably a person doesn't have to be perfect in every respect in order to be emulated. We can maybe ignore or disregard aspects of them which are not so inspiring, but still look for something that is. So perhaps they're not so strong in maybe wisdom, but they have strong faith, and we can emulate with them in that respect. So I think here it's also bringing in that faculty of discernment, that we're able to distinguish which qualities we see in others that we want to develop within ourselves, and which qualities in others that we maybe don't need to kind of develop, or don't need to kind of maybe make such a big deal about, right? Unless it's really very harmful to us. We can still perhaps find something to emulate in some people, in most people, I would say. And this is very important because, like it or not, we will be emulating the people we're around. Whether or not they're virtuous, whether or not they are wise. It's just unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, an attribute of being a conditioned phenomena rather than a kind of permanent entity that is this way or that. We do pick up the behaviors of other people around us, and so it's important to be careful who they are. So I mean, obviously, if we're very established in virtue and wisdom and have a lot of discernment, we might be a little less influenceable than others. But even for myself, I certainly notice that when I'm around people who are less established in the Dhamma and speak less about the Dhamma and inquire less perhaps into the meaning of life and, virtue and all the rest, then yeah, a little bit of inspiration might fade, or I might start to feel a bit kind of less joyful, less inspired mainly. And after a while kind of disengage a bit from that kind of small talk that doesn't seem to go anywhere. So we will be picking up, the attributes of people around us naturally. And that's a very beautiful thing when the good qualities rub off on us. But here it's actually saying we emulate them. And I think that's a little bit more active as well. Like we actually can feel confident enough to emulate those people. And certainly from being around my own teachers, it's strange because I don't necessarily intend to kind of become like them, although it would be wonderful in my mind to become as compassionate and wise and patient as some of my teachers. But I do find I start emulating even the bad jokes sometimes, not often, hopefully. Maybe I should emulate more of them because some of them are not that bad. But it's just bizarre how we can start to sort of think and act and speak like our teachers, and sometimes people even say I'm starting to sound and even look a bit like my teachers. Hopefully, well, I don't know if that's really true, but it's interesting how we start to resonate, really interesting. And I don't know, but for me there's very obviously some people in my life who bring out my best, and at least help me get a glimpse of what that could be. And others who maybe it's more of a struggle to be around and make me actually feel quite bad about myself, or, point out my faults every second moment, even when I didn't intend something the way it landed, and then you feel like a little bit defensive or, misunderstood. So I think that's very natural. So insofar as those people are accomplished in faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, we emulate them in that respect. And this is called good friendship, right? So this is, again, pointing to why it's good friendship, because we will be influenced, we will be conditioned. We need something to look up to, something to guide us. And I'm kind of curious to know what people think about this. The kind of people that we do look up to, who are our role models and why. So before I do open that up, I just want to say one more thing, which is one of the things I really appreciate about Ajahn Brahm is that he often says that we should stand on the shoulders of our teachers. So whilst we would emulate them in respect to their strengths, he would also say, don't stop there, actually take it further. And I was saying this to my parents tonight. I was saying, you know, certainly there's a lot to look up to in one's parents, and they have more life experience, etc. You know, when we're young, they're our first teachers, like it or not. Some are, you know, better at what they do. Some have had their own troubles and struggles, and maybe we have difficult upbringings, even abusive upbringings. And yet still they're our first teachers in many ways. Sometimes we also learn from people how not to be, isn't it? And it's still lessons we can learn. But I think to be really effective as a parent or as a teacher, even a school teacher, let alone a spiritual teacher, we have to want to give others the education, the inspiration, the knowledge to take it further than they could, you know. And I think that's part of respect. Like for me, if I really respect my teacher, then I don't just want to be a clone, right? I mean, it'd be good enough. I'd be happy with that, believe me. You know, if you really kind of have that faith in the depth of somebody's wisdom and compassion, then you'll be very happy. I'm not talking about mannerisms or any of, you know, the superficial things, but just in respect to that. Yet still, we can take it further. We can find our own ways to articulate the Dhamma. We can find our own strengths that may be different from theirs. And I think that's important too. So standing on the shoulders of the wise is also a last little point I'd like to say. So, yeah. Okay, I'm just reading the messages, and there's a little comment in the box, so I'll read that since none of you have your hands up, but then I am going to dig around for some input from you all. So get thinking about role models and what they mean to you. Okay, so this comment is interesting that the maturity of one's virtue is not dependent on one's age. Yes, yes. This is very good because we had this discussion just now with my mum and dad. Can you please talk about what is meant by mature virtue? Right. Yeah, maturity of one's virtue is not dependent on one's age. And at first my mum said, yeah, but maybe it is to some extent because, you know, people who are older generally have perhaps more virtue. Actually, I don't know that virtue is the point. Maybe more wisdom, at least more life experience, yet really not always. And if you start to look at things like past lives, if you have the sense that there is such a thing, you know, even before I was a Buddhist, people would talk about old souls. People would look in my eyes and say, you're an old soul. I say, oh, you're an old soul too. Of course, there's no soul. But there's a sense of like having been there, done that sometimes, right? In people even who are fairly young. And of course, virtue is something like an aspect of one's character. So to me, it's less a symbol of someone's age or associated with someone's age and much more associated with actually how people are brought up. Maybe something of what they bring from past lives too, but very much according to how we're brought up. I mean, I still have a lot of gratitude for my parents that I was brought up to be basically kind and empathic and caring, you know, and to think about others even more than myself. Maybe that's not always in line with the Buddha's advice, but certainly I appreciate that very much. So yeah, what is meant by mature virtue? I think it's about practice again, you know, it's about being established in virtue to the point where it becomes quite unshakable. So in this particular context, mature virtue, I mean, it could be a whole spectrum, you know, of virtue, from maybe keeping the 5 precepts diligently and, you know, for life, or very rarely making mistakes, all the way to kind of that virtue becoming a part of one's character and it being impossible to break any of the precepts, you know. But it could also be to do with, because I think virtue has to mature also through action, active virtue, not only restraint. So I don't know if this is from the suttas or the commentaries, but my first teacher, Goenkaji, used to say there's 2 kinds of virtue. There's Vadita, sila, and Charita. Varita and Charita, sila, virtue. Varita is abstinence. Charita is doing something. Charity still means to do or to go in Hindi language and probably in Pali as well. So I think it's really, because you can keep increasing your virtue, your goodness, your kindness almost indefinitely. And the more you get, the more you have to give, you know, like the more virtuous you become, the more energy you have, the more you want to give and share. So I think there's really no limit to that. So in here, it's not really sure what exactly it means, but certainly I would say someone who you can look up to in that regard. You know, for myself, one of the most important attributes that would qualify someone to be a teacher for me is that their virtue should be more mature than mine. You know, if they're a really good teacher, even if they might be a lay teacher, if their virtue is wonderful, fantastic. But, you know, if they're still kind of, I don't know, messing around with the opposite gender, like, I mean, whatever that person may say, it may sound wise, but it has to manifest in a transformation in that person's life. And if it doesn't, then it kind of, it isn't someone I can look up to in that regard. But then there may be other ways I can look up to those people. So it's important, I think, to have respect. That's a bit of a long-winded answer, but does that touch on a few things there? Okay. Yeah. So anyone else want to do the Q&A?
Yeah.
You want to?
May I ask you to unmute?
Thank you, Gunther. I was trying to work out where it was. Thank you. Oh, great to, yeah, that's a very, the word teacher brings up all sorts in me to start with.
Okay.
So, so that could be that, well, we've got school, of course. There's a school experience. I had one maybe good teacher, and that was because, and if I think of the people I've learnt from, it's because I felt more that they weren't superior, like over me. They were more alongside, more along. I didn't know that at the time, but this is in reflection. If I think about that, I find it really difficult to, even with like someone like Ajahn Brahma, it's almost like, and when I met both of you in person, my experience of you in person was so different from the video thing or people asking questions. There was more conversation. So when you talking about the Dharma, I really felt more safer and more, it was more relatable and it was more relational, actually. I sometimes find the Q&As helpful, but the teacher thing, I get quite anxious about that. So that's just even the word teacher. Never mind what I guess the qualities would be that if I'm looking for some sort of help, I need them to explain why they are saying this to me, rather than that's that, go and do it. Don't like the rule thing. It's like if they're telling me why and I get an understanding, then then it's more integrated, I suppose, and don't feel so controlled.
Yeah.
Any of that sense did in my mind. So I don't know if that was more of a comment than a question. Probably not.
No, it's very interesting. I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people can relate to that. And maybe, you know, due to one's experience as well, like you say, you know, in reflection, the teachers that you respected and felt most, you learn most from were more like walking along your side. I think that's a lovely way to put it. And I've also noticed that the teachers I'm drawn to, they never sort of pitch themselves as higher. And it's actually those qualities that, for me, render them teachers. It's like the humility and the relatability. I mean, when I first met Ajahn, I was so awestruck that I could barely speak. And he soon knocked that out of me by just joking around with me, like really silly stuff, you know, like, behave yourself, you're a male non. He'd say things like that. And I'd be like, and you're a female monk. I thought, oh, that's cheeky, isn't it? But then he really enjoyed it and he like encouraged me. And after a while, I realized why he was doing it. And it was so that I'd ask questions and kind of think for myself. You know, obviously I thought for myself, I'm pretty rebellious, but I don't know. I kind of, for me, I like the combination of reverence and also feeling like I can speak to a teacher as a friend. And that the two seem to develop each other a bit as well for me. But yeah, thank you for that. I think it's really helpful. Is there anything else on that anyone would like to add? Because I think it's probably what the Buddha advised, actually. Tamali. Tamali?
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, probably a very simplest way of explaining is just on the point of age. I do find like my little ones really, you know, sometimes there's so much wisdom in simple things, and I do feel like they teach me a lot sometimes. So sometimes the way maybe we've been conditioned to think, and then we say, oh no, what do they know? But when you actually listen, there's so much that makes sense.
I'll just go to the box here. Isn't it important to discern who to emulate? Exactly. I think all the people who were abused by I think of all the people abused by Roman Catholic priests. They came across as holy, but then there was their behavior. Exactly that. And that's why I think here the Buddha's talking about in respect to their virtue, right? Virtue is action. Virtue is behavior as far as I'm concerned. It's not what you say or what you think, what you believe, it's how you live. And I think it's so important for us to really scrutinize anyone that we might consider someone we want to learn from. I mean, when I use the word teacher, I am using it in quite a Buddhist sense, and maybe that's more pertinent to me as a monastic, that, you know, I've always felt it important to have a teacher because I'm actually learning something. Like there's a very obvious course of practice and training that I'm undergoing. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's the whole point about the Buddha saying this, you know, that we have to, first of all, associate with people who are of mature virtue, etc., virtuous behavior, generosity and wisdom and faith. And you converse and engage in discussions with them. So probably with these Roman Catholic priests, I mean, did you engage in discussions with them? So it's important, isn't it? Because people can get away with more when they're sort of not open to scrutiny. And I think it's so important as a monastic to be willing to answer people's questions, you know, and to say if you don't know, and to admit if you might have got it wrong. Yeah. Shall we come to Diana?
Yeah. Diana, can you unmute, please?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I'm thinking about who I emulate, what kind of people, who they might be. And I think they come into, I'm writing down the kind of the categories of the people. Like it was very interesting what you said, Venerable Canda, about Vadita and Charitya, the two kinds of virtue, because it did stand out to me in the passage that before he talked about faith, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom, he said to associate with householders or their children, whether young and of mature virtue or old and of mature virtue. So the bottom line is mature virtue, and from that builds on the faith, the actual virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. And I think it's true for me too, like people who, I mean, sometimes I really kind of look up to certain celebrities. I know it's silly, you know, like people that are famous because I see them in, you know, the media or whatever. And it's people that are doing a lot of humanitarian works that I look up to a lot. People who are really family oriented and monogamous and respectful to their partner. Like sometimes when they get divorced, I'm like, well, I don't like them as much anymore, you know, because that was part of the thing that I looked up to, like that ability to be committed and honest. And people who are in recovery from addiction, I look up to. People who are abstinent, so that would be like restraint. And then people who are established in Dhamma are spiritually, what I think, advanced, you know, like I want to emulate all those kind of people, just in general, without naming names. So I think the foundation of all of that is the mature virtue, which is the two arms, the Shila, and then also the Dana, the action. Thanks.
Hi. Yeah, I thought, excuse me, I actually thought exactly the same thing that Tamali said about children. So I've got a son, and I've noticed how much I learned from him. And I think her point around children having not being so conditioned. So as we get older, you should do this, you should do that, you should think in this way. And often my son, he's only 4, but he comes out with things. I've noticed this for years, that you kind of say, oh, actually, you're right. Now, as a parent, your natural reaction is, no, you listen to me, but he's actually teaching you things or says things you don't realize you do. And I think that's relates to this thing, doesn't it, about age and also having an open mind, because it's easy to fall into you should do as you're told. And I notice as well, you know, sometimes I tell him off, don't do that and don't do this. And then he starts shouting back at me. Whereas if I sit down, talk to him, why did you do that? He tends to say, well, I just wanted to play with you, for example. He said, well, just ask. And so it's this, it teaches you on so many levels on how to behave, things you're doing that you shouldn't be doing. And then just relating to this thing about idols and things like that. You know, historically for me, it's probably been a lot of business people, but the virtuous behavior, etc., is not always shown in those people. And certainly, you know, from a you know, Buddhist perspective, it would be the likes of yourself and Ajahn Brahm and other people. And I think one thing for me, for example, when I met both of you and everything I've seen is that relatability. We say I didn't feel awestruck, so I felt it was very easy to approach you. It feels very joyous. It feels natural. It doesn't feel like it's a path that you must do this and that, and it makes you happy. I guess that's so for me. And as we say, sort of from other people in general, picking out the nice behaviors or the ones we think are virtuous is what works for me anyway.
So nice, thank you for that. I love that sort of humility of, you know, both you and Tamali mentioned listening, even when we think, oh, you know, we know best. And I guess it's even more important when a person's young, right? Even a child, and just that humility to be able to say, well, maybe they're saying something that I should look at, or what they're saying is right. And yeah, I really also like how you mentioned happiness, you know, because that's an important one, isn't it? Like who you feel good to be around and why, because sometimes we feel like quite on edge to be around certain people. Makes you feel tense, and that's often a really good sign that maybe there's something you need to look at there. Maybe there's something in that person that doesn't mean quite true, or, you know, maybe they're out to get something from you or not to be fully honest. So yeah, that happiness and ease around a person is so important. Yeah, so it's going with the heart a little bit there, huh? Yeah, thank you. Wow, very rich. It's really lovely to hear this. I'll just go to the box. There's a couple of comments here. There's a wonderful poem from Tibetan Buddhism which helps, and this helps me remember that there's metta in myself too. Great. Do share that if you get your hands on it. Maybe not now to distract you from the discussion, but if you know a link or you want to share it another time, sounds lovely. Yeah, there's metta in yourself too. Absolutely, and in a way, that's why I think we naturally start emulating people, actually. I'm not sure it's something we have to actually make ourselves do. For me, like people that I regard as teachers, I guess, are people who point me to what's inside more than anything. You know, they kind of help me to see the goodness that's there in a way. I think you can use time or age to mature, but it doesn't say how mature one is. Yeah, good point. Yeah, like that it's a personal maturing, but you can't necessarily compare yourself to others, right? I have a classmate that's half my age, but he's at least as mature as I am regarding all dimensions. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. We're all in different classes in a way. It's a classmate, but you know, Ajahn Brahm makes this nice simile of you don't judge the juniors, right? People in a junior class, I don't know, grade 1. as like inferior to those in grade 6. It's just they're not yet in grade 6. So it doesn't make sense to compare two people with each other. You know, we've all got our strengths and weaknesses, but as long as we can see in ourselves that we're maturing gradually through life, not always in every aspect, right? I find there's some weaknesses in me that are more stubborn than others. And sometimes it seems to be really on the up, and then you hit a hard patch. And, you know, if you are always measuring yourself and trying to judge where you are, it could be very disheartening. But often the challenges we face are harder. So how can you say we're actually not progressing? It's just the challenges are harder. So it's more, it brings up more difficulty sometimes. Yeah, that's really good. So important to respect young people. I wish I had more teenagers in my life, because as a teenager myself, I felt like I don't know, maybe I wished I could have been listened to a bit more. And I think it's such a kind of critical period in one's life, so much going on. I really have a lot of empathy for teenagers. I'm always quite curious as to their experience. It can be quite a transformative time. Oh, I just seen Nayali coming in. Hey, she's 9, but she's already teaching her mum a lot, and all of us, I'm sure. Okay, one more comment in the box. For me at the moment, it's more that I don't want to emulate. For me, it's more what I don't want to emulate. Yeah. I find I'm distancing myself from people who have morals and ethics, which I don't want. Yeah, good. Absolutely. It's both, isn't it? It's like we have to protect ourselves from that. And in a way, that's more damaging, right? Because you probably already have a lot of goodness in you. Sometimes it's enough just to, you know, protect yourself from the harm. There is that poem. It's in the front of this chapter. I think it's from the Sutta Nipata, but it's about, if you don't find one equal or better, then wander alone. So I think that relates to that. This is a side note, but it looks like you have a halo over you, especially when you move a bit. Okay, move to the right a bit. You mean the mirror? Do you mean the mirror? That's moving to the right a lot. I assure you I don't have a halo. But that's kind of sweet. Okay, one more. I was interested in the question that Ling asked. Oh, did I see it? Could you talk a little about creating good conditions to find good spiritual teachers or friends? Sorry, I might have missed that question, so thank you for bringing it back to my attention. Thank you very much. Does it relate to someone's karma to meet a good teacher, or something I can do to create good conditions to find a good spiritual teacher or friend? I don't know about karma, because karma is something we create constantly. So it's not a fate thing. It's not that you're kind of either fated to have good teachers or good friends, or you're not. I think there's a lot we can do in terms of preparing ourselves for that, as in learning to discern, right? Sharpening up our discernment about what qualities we really appreciate in a person. And then once you actually know what they are, you might start seeing them everywhere in places you don't even expect. Creating the good conditions is always a really wise way to practice, because we can't control the outcome. So I do think creating good conditions means like having the intention, like I say, changing your perception maybe of the people who you already have around you, but also practicing and generating those qualities within yourself. Because if you have a lot of kindness, a lot of patience, for example, you tend to meet others who do as well. So I do think that's one of the things you can do to create good conditions. Did you want to say something as well, Ling? I might have answered some.
Yeah, Mood, please.
Thank you, Venerable. The reason I asked that question, I kind of remember I heard sort of saying, maybe it's from the Zen tradition, I can't remember. It says something like, your teacher only appears when you are ready. I can't remember exactly the phrase. So that was why I sort of karma, you know, like I remember like I met Ajahn Brahms' book about almost 10 years ago. And at that time I was so inspired, but I can't even get the chance to, I even emailed, is any chance that he come to France? But after in a couple of years, maybe through the practice, maybe, and eventually I met you. I was last year, first time I could join online and Zoom with him. So I was just wondering, of course, I love those virtues, and I what you just said exactly touched my heart. If I want those, and I need to cultivate in myself first. But that phrase, it was like, oh, maybe it's my past karma, and something. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really glad that you're coming closer and closer to, to people like Ajahn Brahm and to the Dhamma and to the practice, and, wanting to cultivate all that in yourself. So certainly your karma's extraordinarily amazing. Otherwise you wouldn't be, in these kind of Dhamma discussion groups, right? I mean, who else is choosing to do this evening? Okay, it looks like a big group, but it's 30 people, across the whole of Europe and stretching to America. And, it's not many people. So it's rare to come in contact with the Dhamma and to develop faith in that Dhamma. So that's extraordinarily good karma already. Something else did come to my mind, and I'm trying to remember what that was. Something to create the good conditions. Yeah, I think the Zen phrase that you were talking about is something like when the student's ready, the teacher will come, something like that. Yeah, I mean, it is a very Zen thing, and I don't know how much absolute truth there is in it, but I would also say like karma is an action. And to me, one of the things that's been a strength, I think, is that I persist. Whether I'm really ready for such teachers, I don't know, but I kind of enforce myself on them. I mean, I am sincere, right? I'm sincerely practicing. There's nothing else I want to do, but I don't give up. And I think, that's one of the reasons that I create these. I don't know what it is. It's good fortune a bit as well. And it's conditions coming together, certainly. And it won't last either. So I shouldn't get complacent about that. Teachers pass away. So I think as long as we understand the purpose of a good spiritual friend, that really it's to learn to imbibe those qualities, because we can't depend on them forever, but certainly when you see something good, try to have as much contact as you can. That's what I try and do. Yeah, and I've noticed the more people kind of persist, the more contact becomes possible. It's even the case with people in this community. It's like, not necessarily because they ask, but it's like the people who consistently serve a lot, they tend to get closer contact, even if it's only, a 5-minute chat with Ajahn Brahm at the end of a talk to sign a book. But it's different because I will first of all introduce them as well, and there's some kind of connection there, through being close to the Dhamma, through serving a lot as well. Yeah. Can we come to Olivia? You have your hand raised for a while.
Can you unmute, please?
Yeah, I was thinking about what's really helpful for me is looking for what's beautiful in the people around me and focusing more on that. And I'm a lot happier when I do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's very wise practice, because that way you're not just looking for perfection or some kind of like outward symbol of someone who's supposed to be holy, right? And you're actually training your mind. And once you start doing that, you'll see it everywhere. Just like if we look for the faults, we see it everywhere, isn't it? You just look for the things that trigger you all the time. You're just going to get really wound up. So yeah, that's brilliant practice. And it's what's meant by sense restraint, at least part of that. Sense restraint just doesn't mean turning away from things. It actually means using your senses in a way that's going to promote beneficial states of mind. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else you wanted to add? Okay. All right, I'll just check in the box if I've got everybody's comment there. All right, please feel free to ask again or contribute more at any point. And just to say as well, it's nice to see Melanie there. And I'm not sure who you're with. Is that your sister? It's Marion, right? No, it's Crystal. I can't tell. Marion. Yeah. I'm like, you look like Crystal, but you're not Crystal. And also, who else is there? I saw Cass is there. I've not seen you for a long time. Lovely to see you too. Oh, okay. So, shall we keep going with another part of a sutta? Yeah. All right. So this is good friendship in monastic life. And this is the classic sutta that many people have heard, but maybe only heard in part, from the Samyutta Nikaya, 45th chapter, verse 2. And this is to Ananda. So the Buddha's talking to his close attendant disciple, who's also his cousin. The Venerable Ananda approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side and said, Bhante, which means venerable, this is half of the spiritual life. That is good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship. So here Ananda thinks he's had a very deep insight because it's a whole half of the holy life. So he's feeling that's a lot. It's really important. But the Buddha says, not so, Ananda, not so, Ananda. This is the entire spiritual life, Ananda. That is good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship. I'm just pausing because that's kind of big deal. And then this is the reason. When a monk or a nun or anyone else has a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, it is to be expected that that person will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. So to me, that's very beautiful because this links up the purpose of a spiritual friend or having a spiritual friend with the practice. So unless you actually develop the Eightfold Path, is it really much use having a spiritual friend? You know, maybe you're just wasting the opportunity, right? And maybe that's going to create bad karma if you have a spiritual friend and someone in your life who could inspire you, but you actually miss the opportunity. So it is to be expected that they will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. So again, pointing at conditioning, isn't it? It's almost inevitable that you will start to practice properly. And how, Ananda, does a monastic or a layperson, I'm adding that in, with a good friend, develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path? Here, one develops right view, which is based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. So this is a bit different, and this is quite deep, because we're not just talking about right view that stays as view, for example, or stays at the so-called mundane level, but right view, when it's really going to get you far, has to be based upon seclusion. That means a lot of practice, right? Not only physical seclusion, but also seclusion from the hindrances, seclusion from the senses, you know, in deep meditation. That means paviveka nisitam. Nisitam, which is here translated as based upon, literally means like sitting on. So standing on, sitting on, seclusion, right? So with seclusion as its foundation. And that doesn't mean you're always in seclusion. Otherwise you won't have that wise friend. But you go off and practice in seclusion, which is based upon dispassion. And the word for that is viraga, which Ajahn Brahm also translates as disappearing or vanishing, fading. Here I think dispassion is fairly good because it does mean, well, it's both. I mean, what you're not passionate about tends to fade, right? It tends to fade from your awareness. So it's like a lessening of the clinging. And also cessation, that's nirodha. So when you don't cling, when things start to fade, eventually they disappear from your radar. Even you can see that with thinking, right? So first of all, you have, say, first of all, you become secluded from the thinking, you know, you don't focus on that. Then you kind of lose interest, you know, and the thinking starts to fade and eventually it stops when you ignore it long enough. Maturing in release. So the outcome of seclusion, of fading away or dispassion and of cessation matures in release. So you're released in this example from those thoughts, for example. And then one develops right intention or right motivation, as Ajahn Brahm likes to translate it, based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. One develops right speech, based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. And then he goes through the other aspects of the Eightfold Path: right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right stillness, let's call it, or right samadhi, which is also, all of these are based upon seclusion, dispassion, and cessation, maturing in release. So this is really deep practice of the Eightfold Noble Path. And just a word here about the word right, because I know that can kind of also trigger things in people who are kind of conditioned to feel that, you know, some kind of, especially people who've been lectured at about good and evil, right and wrong, bad and good. The word right can sound a little bit moralistic sometimes, but what we really mean by right in this context is right in the sense that it's leading to release, it's leading to freedom, it's leading to enlightenment. In that sense, it's right according to the goal. So it's the right practice to develop, to take you to enlightenment. This is what it means. So some people have suggested using the word wise, but wise is not essential. A wise way to practice sounds to me optional. You know, you can, it's wise too, but there might be other things you can do, or there might be, you know, other things you need. But right is like right and also sufficient. It's enough in and of itself, all of these things together. So it's in this way, Ananda, that a monk or nun or layperson with a good friend develops and cultivates the Noble Eightfold Path. So I think emulation is also involved here as well, because presumably our friends, our wise friends, also ought to be developing these things based upon those things too. And I like to remember that for myself, because I do quite a lot of solitary retreat. And sometimes I feel like, oh, am I abandoning my community? You know, is it kind of taking too much time away from the project? But then I remember, no, it's being an example in seclusion. And that's actually a phrase from the suttas, that one should be a leader in solitude. So that can be a lesson in and of itself. You know, it's one thing talking about retreats. Retreats are good, meditation's good for you, blah, blah. But if your teacher or your friend would never do those retreats themselves, then you'd be like, really? Then why don't you do it? Right? Then why are you so restless? Why do you always, you know, get busy and don't take that time for yourself? So, and then the Buddha continues, by the following method. So this is a second method now. So not only are we going to start developing the Noble Eightfold Path with a good friend, but this is something else. So by the following method too, Ananda, it may be understood how the entire spiritual life is good friendship, good companionship, and good comradeship. By relying upon me, and this means the Buddha himself, as a good friend, beings subject to birth are freed from birth. Beings subject to old age are freed from old age. Beings subject to death are freed from death. Beings subject to sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair are free from sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair. By this method too, Ananda, it may be understood how the entire spiritual life is good friendship, good companionship, and good comradeship. Ooh, that gives me like the chills a little bit, because they are my goals. And it's just so wonderful that the Buddha can show the way out of all these things. And again, I think emphasizing that it's not about believing him, it's not about him being right. His interest is in beings being freed from suffering. That's it. You know, so I mean, as Olivia said, and I think very beautifully, like the practice is to free us from suffering, right? The practice is to use our minds in ways that elevates them and brings us happiness. It doesn't even matter if that person has a lot of faults, or, you know, if we believe this or that about the teachings. What matters is that our hearts are becoming lighter and more joyful and more free. So this is the direction that the whole teaching is going in. And you could also use the word right to mean right in that sense, right in that it's freeing us from suffering, you know, that there really is an escape. And it's right to seek that escape. Yeah. So I love this sutta, but I would like to stop getting over inspired and talking too much and invite some discussion. Does Nikki? Yeah.
Unmute, please, Nikki.
That confuses me somehow. I don't know why. I'd like to ask you a question as you're talking about this, and I'm wondering, I remember, I think it's when I first met you actually, when you said, I think I was probably complaining that there was no Buddhists around for miles and I'm on my own and I've got no one. There's probably fair play, there wasn't. And I remember you saying, well, to stay away from the wrong company, I say that like that, in that is something. So even though I was on my own quite a lot in solitude, and I was seeking, of course, that wise friendship actually, and that, and it wasn't there, but and there was some pain around being on my own around that, and there was that. You said that really helped. Now the bit I want to ask you is, so I've over the year or so I've met somebody that was a Buddhist, and we've been sharing bits and that, and then sporadically this. And they're certainly quite spiritual, but they will go off on. I got to make sure they're not in the room. I got paranoid. Let me just look. No, they're not. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I thought, I don't want. I'm saying it with kindness and love this, but they go off and they do go off and smoke weed every so often, and I don't take drugs. I'm very, very, I have to, with that. And it's left me now, particularly today, I'm even thinking about, they come back as if nothing's happened for them because nothing has happened, but it hurts me and it really puts me in a place of confusion. And I think I can't be around this, but there's a great loss attached to that as well.
Right.
So it's
you said that very beautifully though.
Okay.
You've articulated it very beautifully, like you've articulated your feelings about it. And I just wonder if, I know that's really hard and I have no idea if that would feel appropriate, but if you would articulate it that way to them, because to me, it comes across as though you really value them and actually care for them a lot. And there would be a loss, and that seems quite touching. Like it doesn't seem judgmental. It's just, you're talking about it as confusing for you. And it just seems very vulnerable and open. I wonder if that might.
I did say that. They were like, they didn't understand. And I think that's as little, they have so little self-worth. That really hurts. Well, it hurts that they're doing that to themselves. Right. So I wonder, because then a part of me goes, I don't want to be around that because it makes me uncomfortable. There's because there's a fallout from that, quite a big fallout from that just go anyway. So it makes it very difficult. And it becomes about that. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know if I want that anymore, to something to become about that.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's something you have to know for yourself, right? Like, is there a way you can have that contact, the part that is nourishing, maybe from a distance somehow, maybe, not in person too much, or in a place where they can't do that, maybe in a public place, I don't know.
So you say don't see them. I can't tell you. I'm not asking you to tell me what to do, by the way.
No, that is an option. Absolutely. It absolutely is. I mean, if it's not nourishing you and if it's causing conflict and confusion and, you feel like that's just not where you're at, that's okay too. I mean, we shouldn't feel guilty about that, You can still send them metta.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Buddha does say, right, that we can be discerning in who we hang around with. I mean, monastics don't hang around with that. That's why you become monastics. You go to monasteries to be around people who practice virtue. It doesn't mean you condemn other people, but we choose not to be around it for our own protection as well. So especially if you're feeling confused or like vulnerable in some way, then maybe that's not what you need. Yeah. It has to be a personal, I mean, it's not something anyone else can and has the right to sort of say, but it's entirely your choice. Can I come to Veronica?
Veronica, can you unmute, please?
Yep. I just wanted to refer to the previous speaker's conversation, Nikki, and I just recall you saying about Ajahn Brahm talking about a tiger. You can send metta to the tiger. You don't have to go and touch the tiger or cuddle the tiger or whatever it is. That just sprang to mind to be appropriate for Nikki. I don't know.
I love when people support one another like this. Thank you. Here comes Bill.
Bill, can you unmute, please?
Got it. Yeah, I can really relate with what Nikki's talking about as somebody who abstains from all intoxicants except cigars, which I am smoking today. My apologies. I can't
Sorry,
hear
Bill,
you.
could you come a bit closer to your computer? Because your sound is quite hard to catch.
It's the earbud. Is that better?
That's loads better.
Okay, now I can't hear you, but you can hear me. But I can relate with Nikki as somebody who I do not take any intoxicants, but I do smoke cigars. Sorry. We have to protect ourselves. And that's why I'm on this path, in order to develop a sense of self, in order to bring myself to the next level, whatever that is. And level is not, it's not as, I'm not finding this a linear path, but yeah, if somebody's making me that uncomfortable, I have to, like the tiger, perfect example, wish you well, but I cannot engage.
Thank you so much. Can we come to Sean?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, it was kind of leading on. It's not the same as what Nikki was saying, but hopefully it might be helpful, and maybe for other people, that, yeah, I've had some difficult times recently with people very close to me within my family. I also work with them. And, you know, with a family, obviously there's a sort of relationship built in there. And, you know, I've suffered a lot. Obviously I'm part of the relationship, but I've felt there's been some really harsh behavior, let's put it like that. And going back to what Nikki was saying about how she felt, I felt like I just needed distance. And it's somewhat hard because we're forced to see each other almost daily, but there was less engagement from me. And I felt that's helped the distance. I've been trying as much as possible with the metta, and more recently, especially since I did the New Year retreat, sort of focusing on the positives of their character and trying to see that I can see they are suffering a lot, and they don't realize, and they're very lost. And it's, you know, but at the same time, then it comes over to me and others, maybe in a very aggressive, it can be quite, you know, putting me down, it makes me feel awful, really horrible. But that distance has helped me, and maybe a bit of distance will also help you reflect. I guess it's like when you meditate, it gives you that peace to then see what is right for you. And if you have a bit of distance, that answer will give itself. It will allow you to see if you can give them more metta, if you feel comfortable around them, or just engaging less with them, but maybe sometimes. Or it may be that you move on. You've had the relationship that's worked between you, and that it might not work. I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. But I think thanks for sharing your situation, because I think it's good when you actually have these real life examples that are very close to your heart.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that it's never that clear cut. It's messy. It's, you know, it's multifaceted and complex sometimes. Yeah, I also really appreciate both you and Bill, Sean and Bill, saying that you know, it's okay to have that distance, because I think that's something I also have to like fully imbibe sometimes. you know, especially as a Buddhist nun who's supposed to be compassionate to everybody, right? You sometimes have this idea that that should manifest a certain way, as in everyone can come to the vihara, right? But then from time to time, there are people who behave in ways that are really quite harmful and, you know, make it very difficult for me to perform my role. And I actually have to say it's not going to be beneficial, you know, to have that, especially when I'm alone. So sometimes I find that really difficult. And I even spoke to my mum tonight. She said, why you make such a big thing of it? You just say no. But that's not how I've actually been brought up at all. So I need to hear it, you know, again and again. I need to hear that. So I think it's really nice to hear these perspectives. Thank you. I hope that also helps Nikki, because as I say, maybe not the first thing that comes to my mind always, although I do think, you know, I know that the Buddha advises that as well. Yeah. Anything else on this? We're actually 10 minutes from the end, and there is another sutta, but I kind of feel like that might be a bit much for today. We'd probably just have to read through it and that would be the end of it. I mean, I'm happy to do that if people feel up for it, or we can see if there's anything else people want to share. I'll just read out Sean's comment because we didn't hear it from the box, but he says he's been doing the same as Olivia. That means the focusing on the good in others over the past week since the New Year retreat. Yay! And have noticed a big difference. That's great. I get inspired to do that too. Yeah. Yeah, because the change is within, right? It's not really about trying to analyze the people kind of correctly, because you can never know. You can never really get a measure of anyone, not even of yourself. But it's about that difference in oneself. Yeah, definitely. And sometimes that's not the best way of practice, because sometimes, you know, difficulties are there, and we can, if we do that practice too much, we actually are in denial sometimes of things that are actually too harmful to be around. So again, you know, we have to be very honest with ourselves and accept where we're at, because we're not perfect human beings who can handle everything. And I've noticed that some people seem to be able to, but often it's because they've got huge support systems around them and a lot of protection. You know, people aren't going to get that close. It's very different when you're alone with people in your family, or, you know, in a house or a living situation. It's extremely different to being like in a huge protected space where you see people for 5 minutes and that's it. Yeah. Okay, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit much to go through the next one. Anyone would love to go through more? No. Okay, so I will just read out the comments. I've been doing the same since I returned from Oxford, and it's really helped. So that's someone else here who has also been focusing on the good in others, and hopefully as well from time to time doing the opposite and just saying, okay, now it's enough. Not looking at the faults, but, you know, now it's enough. Like, now I'm not feeling so great. I need space, because that's also giving yourself time. We can become too other-centric as well. We need to give ourselves, like I think Sean said, now the space to keep the perspective, keep things in perspective, and keep our minds balanced. I found that very helpful, you know, especially when I'm staying outside the monastery and I'm exposed to all kinds of things I wouldn't normally be, like just TV, right? Even just things like the amount of TV, even if I'm not sitting there, like the noise of it, the agitation of it, and just taking myself off when I find I'm getting irritated or picking up some of that energy, just taking myself off and closing the door to meditate is really, really key. Not leaving it too long until I'm kind of yeah. Okay, so very lovely. I think next week I'll be doing the Sutta class. I'm not sure it's actually online listed as a Sutta class next week. Is it on the website? Does anyone know? I might have to change it. It does say we're doing one, yeah? Good. So I don't have to change anything. So I am doing one, but it'll be from Cambridge. So you'll get yet another background design. Today we have the Buddha, a very small silver Buddha, and also Jerapin, my lovely bear. Okay, one more question. Keep coming in. They keep coming in. So I don't know if it's really a question, but a comment. It's important to also note your attachment to helping others and to step back. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we become overly involved, right? We think we're helping, but we're just getting involved and interfering, actually. We think we know best. We're maybe not listening to when they've had enough of us, or to when, you know, we're just running on restlessness or interfering kind of mode. So definitely, yeah. And to step back. Diana says, I hope Venpiti Sukha is well. She is upstairs, actually. She lives, she's been here for many, many months while I've been on retreat, but now I'm back at my parents' place. We have Venerable Piti Sukha, the teddy bear bikini, and Britain's first. And Ajahn Bear, probably also Britain's first. And Bamboozle, who's the gender non-binary deer, definitely Britain's first. So they'll all come back with me to Oxford, hopefully, if I remember. No, I think I'll bring them back. Good. So I think I shall hand over to someone, Minori, who's going to say a few words to end. And then I will make sure we've covered all the upcoming retreats as well.
Yeah, so today's Sutta discussion is offered on a donation basis in the spirit of generosity. Any contribution you are able to make is very gratefully received and will help support Venerable Canda's physical needs, the day-to-day running of our new vihara in Oxford, and the development of England's first monastery, where women can train towards the full bhikkhuni ordination. We have to keep reminding that. I'm now adding the link for the donation, and also, if you are capable, you can provide a food dana to Venerable by visiting the vihara or remote ordering. Buddha created the fourfold Sangha for us to live in a community. And as a lay person, it is our duty to look after the needs of the monastics. So if you are keen to provide food, please contact team@anukampaproject.org for more details. Also, you can offer a supermarket delivery as well. And for all those inquiries, please check with team@anukampaproject.org. And on the special events, there is a one-day practice with Oxford Insight coming on the 28th of January. If you are keen, you can get registered. The details are in the website and in the last newsletter as well. And also Ajahn Brahmali's 8-day residential retreat in May. I think it still has places available. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beautifully said. And yeah, the retreat in Oxford's a day retreat with me on the soft mind, one of my favorite subjects. It actually is a real thing. In Pali, it means mudu, which means soft. Anyway, so that's a day retreat, and yeah, there's definitely places on Ajahn Brahmali's retreat. I actually went to visit the venue today for the second time. I mean, actually for many times, because we've done a retreat there before, but it was really lovely going back, and it's really in the middle of nowhere, but you can get there from Sheffield or Manchester. But when you're there, it feels like, oh, you just got countryside around you. It's in a small cute village, but there's countryside everywhere. You can walk for hours. And it brought back a lot of happy memories. So a few of you are registered, but not enough. So do come, because that way Ajahn Brahmali will keep coming to England. Otherwise he might go to Poland. He is going to Poland afterwards, and I know they've got huge amounts of people who are into him. So we have to keep him coming here. I think it's, well, I don't know if it's that much closer for most of you, but anyway, this way he can support the bikinis as well. So I also just want to say hi to Leonie, who's here. Hi, Leonie. That's Naile's younger sister, but I need to wave to you because you're very important in this discussion. Thank you for being there. Lovely. Well, I've enjoyed it very much as well. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing people next week. Please take care of each other. Lovely to see Marion and Melanie together as well. I think, Marion, your hair was shorter before. Maybe that's why. First, I thought you were Crystal. Was it shorter before? Or maybe you tie it back? I don't know. Yeah. So nice to see you both there together. Oh, isn't it one of your birthdays? Isn't that why? Yeah. Marion or Melanie? I need to unmute you.
Yeah, it's my birthday tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. Oh, that's really great.
Thank you to everyone.
Oh, I'm sure the whole group want to wish you happy birthday and sending you a lot of love. That's great. I kind of wish that we had a metta meditation tomorrow, but I haven't put it on the website, so I guess it's a bit short notice, but I'm hoping not, let me think. So not next Saturday, but the one after that, we'll do a metta meditation. So like Sunday, what would it be? Around about the 22nd, something like Saturday, the 21st, 22nd. Yeah, we'll do a metta meditation. I'll put it on the website. But anyway, I'm thinking of you, Marion, with metta on your birthday. All right. Shall we unmute you all and you can wave goodbye if you wish?